old Steve Sarkisian. Casey, I know you alluded to this too. You like Texas. Tell us why. What about them do you like?
Pretty much everything. I'm staking my claim on Texas. I think Texas plus 670 to win the national title. I'd love to get that more in like plus 750. I think that's probably more the right value, but close to 7-1. I like Texas to win the national championship. I have a ton of respect for Sarkisian. Last year, you look at their season, they had a tough kind of opening slate. They go on the road to Ohio State. They go on the road to Florida. And this is before Florida's season really kind of falls completely apart. They had one loss and could still kind of play for a playoff spot. So Florida had not given up on Billy Napier in that season yet. So Texas loses that game as well. I think Arch certainly showed some first-year starting quarterback learning curve, had some challenges with accuracy and just kind of finding the open receivers, going through his progressions. But, I mean, it's impossible to say this given what Joe Burrow did in 2019 compared to his first year in 2018. But I'm looking at like a second-year jump in the same atmosphere as what Burrow did at LSU in terms of what I expect out of Arch this year. I think the guy's a really talented quarterback. It's become popular and fun to just shit on the kid and say, you know, he's a bust. He's only getting this much praise and hype because of his name. And maybe he's getting a little bit more than he should, but I think he's a really talented kid. I like him. I think every time I hear him talk in the media, he's very down to earth. They're just a good, solid, salt to the earth people. I love that they brought in Cam Coleman. I love Ryan Wingo. They got Emmett Mosley, so they got weapons galore. They can pound the rock if they need to with two transfer running backs in Raleek Brown from Arizona State and Hollywood Smothers from NC State. They got defensive talent. Colin Simmons, probably a top 10 to top 15 edge rush type pick in the NFL draft next year. I love this roster. I love that they got Will Muschamp back on the defensive side of the ball, calling that defense. Sark running the offense. Arch at the helm, weapons galore, offensive line, defensive line. Like, what do you not like about the Longhorns? I'm hook 'em this year. I think they beat Ohio State in week 2. And look, I'm an Ohio State fan. We got to go on the road, but Ohio State beating them shock me? No. But you don't win every big game. We beat them last year. We go on the road this year. They got the more experienced roster, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. So I think Texas makes a statement in week 2. They beat the Buckeyes. Then looking at the rest of their schedule, I like their runway to, I'm not calling undefeated, but they go on the road to Knoxville. They get Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout in Dallas. They host Gators in a revenge game. They host Ole Miss. They host Mississippi State. It's right there in the middle of the season. They don't play anything but a neutral game from basically Tennessee on September 26th. They don't go back on into a true road environment until November 7th when they go play at Missouri. Not the toughest road game. The end of the season is tough. At Missouri, at LSU, Arkansas, kind of a nice little break there between LSU, and then at Texas A&M on Black Friday to end the season. If they beat Ohio State, I very much see them getting to 8-0, 9-0, and then going into their last 3 games at LSU and at Texas A&M. I don't think it's crazy. I like Texas to go undefeated, I think, more than I like Georgia to go undefeated for sure. So that's where I'm at on Texas. Ryan, I'll kick it over to you. And I'm interested to hear your take on my take that the Longhorns are going to beat the Buckeyes in week 2.
I disagree. I think Ohio State wins that game. I think your take is, I guess it just shows how high you are in Texas, but I think that's almost crazy to say with Ohio State on the schedule, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, LSU, and Texas A&M. I think those are all games they could lose. I think their offensive line might struggle a little bit, and I'm definitely lower on Texas than Vegas is, than Casey is, and probably than most people in the country are. I don't know. I think they could struggle. I think their wide receivers are obviously awesome. There's no excuse for Manning at all. If he can't get it done with Wingo and Coleman, who transferred in, he's not going to be able to get it done at the next level. So I do think that they will have some success on offense, but overall, I think their schedule is too brutal. I think Ohio State beats them. I think that's a brutal 4-game stretch with Tennessee, Oklahoma, Florida, Ole Miss. I don't know. I do like Sark. I do somewhat want to defend him. A lot of people are saying that you can't win the big one. It's like, yeah, well, either could Signetti, either could Ryan Day, either could Harbaugh. Those are the last 3 national championship winners. So I hate that argument. He can't win the big one. It's like, well, no one can until they do. So I just don't think it's going to be.
Kirby, too.
What was
Kirby
that?
before that. Kirby won the 2 before that. Everyone said he couldn't get past Saban, couldn't win the big one, and then won back-to-back national titles.
Yeah, and no one even said it about Signetti just because there wasn't even enough time for people to say that. I don't think it's going to be this year. I think it's just too brutal of a schedule. I think Ohio State's defensive line might really rattle Manning early, and I like the Buckeyes to go into Austin and get the W.
So would you call for, do you like the no on the missed playoff at plus 155?
No, because for a season-long bet like that, that's just not enough juice. I don't have enough conviction to lay something like that and wait 20 weeks.
Fair enough. Marsh, what about you? The Longhorns feel like they would be kind of in that same realm of teams and fan bases you really have a disdain for. So, but Texas, Ohio State, that's a huge Saturday night game, that week 2 of the season. Do you think Texas gets it done against the Buckeyes this year, and then are they off to the races, or are you more on Ryan's side where going to be a tough go of it and they're going to struggle a little bit?
Yeah, listen, I'm just glad that the Big Ten has scheduled such great out-of-conference games. We look historically, and it's just been kind of dog shit. So I love seeing the Buckeyes take on Texas. I thought that was a great game last season. I think Ohio State is the circled game for Texas, and it's early in the season. If they can beat the Buckeyes, I'm bullish on most of the overs for Texas. If they lose to Ohio State, I honestly am probably flipping the other way. I do like Texas to win the SEC. I like their over on wins. I like them to make the college football playoff. I don't think the odds to win it all are juicy enough for me. Although if they do get to the playoff, they will have had a very proven track record with this schedule. Has Arch taken that next step that you talked about? The weapons are insane. This is Sark's best roster he's ever had. The fact that they got Cam Coleman in the portal, they've still got Ryan Wingo and Emmett Mosley. And then you go out, you get Raleek Brown, Hollywood Smothers. Listen, as a local Raleigh guy, I watched Hollywood Smothers last year. I was talking about how this guy is really good and how he's not going to be a Wolfpack member this season. And I was exactly right on that because the guy is electric. Both him and Raleek Brown have the home run hitting speed. They're those fun running backs to watch where every time they touch the ball, you don't know if they're going to break it or not. You team that up with Sark. You team that up with Arch Manning and an RPO. You got Wingo and Cam Coleman on the outside. How do you not look at this offense and say, if Arch Manning is who we thought he is supposed to be, that they are not the best offense in college football? This will be a big storyline throughout the season, and it's going to start in College Game Day week 2 against the Buckeyes. I've heard a lot of chatter about the Texas fans too. They may not like me saying this, but supposedly Texas games are just kind of a social outing. You know, there's a lot of hot blondes and cowboy boots that just show up for the drinks and the social media posts and kind of throw out a bunch of hookums out there. I couldn't believe when I heard that recently. I'd be interested to see if that's a real thing and what Matthew McConaughey has to say about that, or Glenn Powell for that matter. But I like Texas a lot this season. You mentioned it, Nard. They don't have holes anywhere. They are over 9.5 wins is plus 120. I get positive odds for what I think could be the best offense in college football. Probably number 2 right behind the Miami Hurricanes, but the schedule is telling why the odds are priced that way. What we're not talking about is the end of that schedule at LSU November 14th, then Arkansas, and then Texas A&M on a short week. They play 3 games, 2 of which are on the road at LSU and Texas A&M in the 13-day span. That's hard to do as 19, 20, 21-year-old athletes. Pros, you know, they've got a little bit more experience with those quick turnarounds and kind of how they're doing the practice schedule. But that's really what it's going to come down to. I think if they get past the Buckeyes, I think they beat Tennessee. I think they beat Oklahoma. I think they beat Florida. I think Ole Miss will be a good one, but they should ultimately win that game. They're looking really good. but they come into this little tripping hazard, as I'll call it, at the end of the season with three games in 13 days and going to Death Valley and Kyle Field will be interesting to see.
I wanted to kick it over to Ryan since I think he is uniquely qualified to kind of comment on the Texas fan base. I visited Ryan a couple times when he lived in Austin, and we would go out downtown and you would see Longhorns, and there was obviously a good amount of like Longhorn fan presence, but to me it never felt as feverish and as obsessed with the Longhorns as like Columbus does about the Buckeyes, and they're both true cities with major college football programs within the city. Is that fair, Ryan, or is Texas every bit as Longhorn obsessed as Columbus is Buckeye obsessed?
No, overall, as a city, you're definitely right from what I saw. It's more of a transient city, Austin. So there's just a lot more people just not from Austin, where Columbus, it seems like almost everyone has a tie to Ohio. And you go out here on a Saturday. I mean, it is, you see 100% Buckeye stuff. It's crazy. I always joke that that's just 100% of people's wardrobe is in Columbus is just Ohio State shit. Where in Austin, you go out on a Saturday, you could go to bars where there's just as much other SEC team stuff as Texas. There's clearly a ton of Texas stuff out, but it's not as dense, as thick. And I only went to one Texas game, but I definitely experienced what Max mentioned earlier, that it was not a very wild crowd at all. It was an opening game of the year. It was a top 25 team coming in. I think it was UL Monroe a few years ago. They were like 24.
No, it was Billy Napier the year before he went to Florida. He took Louisiana. It was like Louisiana. I think they just go by Louisiana now, the Raging Cajuns.
Okay, so it was Louisiana. Yeah, it was, not a huge game, but they were like 24th in the country, first game of the year. I went thinking it was going to be just a great atmosphere, and it was anything but that. I was very disappointed. It was like 110 degrees, so hard to get too wild in that temperature. But it's the first game of the year. You go to a Buckeyes game, doesn't matter if Akron's coming to town week one. People are fired up, and it's crazy. Yeah, maybe the third quarter, people start dipping out when it's 52-0 or whatever. But it just never got crazy in Austin the way I really thought it would. But I also never went to a huge game. When I was there, Alabama came to town a few times, and they had night games, and the atmosphere looked incredible. So I do think it's one of those kind of a front-running crowd where they will really show up for the big games. And I think they've proven that.
For sure.
The other thing with Texas too is we didn't talk a whole lot about is the defense too. With Colin Simmons, I think we briefly mentioned him, but he had 12 sacks, 15.5 tackles for loss. You bring in Rasheem Biles from Pitt to replace Anthony Hill, but it's going to be interesting to see because we talk about that Buckeyes game again. Julian Sayin kind of struggled against those top tier defenses last season. Is he going to take the leap? And we'll get into that next week in the Big Ten episode. But if Colin Simmons is wreaking havoc off the edge, is this something that we see sustainably for the rest of the season too? Because if the defense starts getting humming, then all of a sudden that 6-10 national championship value becomes a little bit more enticing. From a picks perspective, I look at Texas. For me, it's over 9.5 plus 120. SEC champ plus 310. Both of those are probably more juicy odds in the SEC than we've seen for most of these teams.
Do you guys think I'm crazy to call for the year 2 Joe Burrow type pop for Arch? And do you guys view Arch as the quarterback that'll kind of separate himself and be the clear-cut number 1 pick in the draft next year? Or do you think he may struggle again and be kind of polarizing, mixed bag of opinions from the NFL scouts and more of like a fringe top 10, top 15 type pick next year?
I think Arch does take the next step. I think there's too many things surrounding him to combine with his talent to not do so. Obviously, he's a Manning. There's a pedigree there. Having a coach like Sark in front of you, we saw the struggles that Arch had up front last year, and then he absolutely came on just with a torrid pace at the end of the season, especially in that bowl game. If we look at his trajectory, everything logically says this is what we expected from Arch Manning is what we will see this season. Now, if that doesn't happen, let's say Buckeyes week 2, that defense we know is a tough unit always. Let's say he struggles immensely. All of a sudden, this conversation becomes a lot different because he's surrounded by too much. He has too much talent to not be wildly successful. If he's not, we're talking about one of the most overhyped players. If he is, we're talking first or second overall pick more than likely. For Arch Manning, I feel like this could swing one of two ways in Jurassic fashion. I'm on the side of I think Arch makes the leap. I don't know if it's Joe Burrow-esque, but I do think we could see, I would even say like Andrew Luck type elevation there.
Ryan, you like Arch? Team's going to be marching for Arch?
I am going to take the other side and say there is a better chance he has a Drew Aller type year where he goes into the year thinking he's going to be number 1 and falls. I don't think he'll actually fall out of the top 10 and be like Drew Aller, but I do not think he has that Joe Burrow pop at all. I mean, that's one of the greatest seasons in college football history, if not the greatest for a quarterback. I just don't see it happening. I don't see them having that success. I see a few losses for them, starting with the Buckeyes. And I will say I do not think he will be the number 1 draft pick. I think another QB will emerge and take that spot.
All right, guys. Well,